Hi, Julie Jones from SSB Performance, Smarter, Stronger, Better Mindset Training, here with this week's Mindset Made Simple Tip of the Week, brought to you by Game Day Sportswear. This week we're talking about managing the moment and frustration, and how frustration affects our performance. This weekend, I had a ton of fun. I was at Akron's historical Firestone Stadium, which is celebrating 100 years on Saturday, the 14th, with a big parade, food truck, softball games. It's going to be tons of fun in Firestone Park in Akron, Ohio. But this past weekend, we got to celebrate the Ohio State softball tournament. 7 division, 21 games, and I got to do color commentary for Divisions 2 and Divisions 3. Shout out to my partners Ted Walker and Rob Polinsky. We had a great time, and the games were awesome. It was so fun to watch all of these athletes pour their heart and soul into this quest to be a state champion. And there were 6 new state champions named this past weekend, 1 returning, Wheelersburg. Congratulations to them. But it was a great weekend. And as I was watching, the great plays were awesome. But as a mental performance coach, of course, I'm talking about the game and thinking about this through the lens of mental performance tools. And I noticed a lot about what happened in between pitches, or in between runs scored, or after a bad call. And as I was sitting there, it reminded me of tennis studies that researchers have done in the sport of tennis on the behavior of tennis players between points. What people do between points makes a huge difference in what they do in the next point. Obviously, when things don't go well, we act a little differently than when they do go well. And it later in the match or later in a game, our tendency to get a little more demonstrative takes over. They say that lots of head movement correlates with losing, interestingly enough, in between matches. And whether or not that's the case in every sport, I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure that all athletes are similar in their response to success and failure. But what we know is that people who manage their emotions and showed control and use appropriate body language were more likely to be successful. They were more likely to win matches. Now, whether or not that's just because they're happy more often because more of their balls go in and more of their opponent's balls go out is irrelevant. The bottom line is how we look makes a difference, and how we hold our posture changes the way that we work physiologically. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But here's the crazy part. Research also found that the way you look in warm-up, or what you do in between pitches or points or whatever it is, whatever sport you're playing, that makes a difference on how your opponent feels. People that showed negative body language in warm-up gave their opponents an edge. The opponent says, hey, if you use that kind of body language, I feel like I can beat you. So what we're doing with responses and the way that we look and the words that we're using, where our eyes are, where our chest is, what our movements are, the effort we're giving, all of those things give our opponent a thought about how they feel about themselves, which is really something very important for us to understand. So not only does the way that we're standing, whether we're down or up, or where our eyes are, or how we're managing frustration affect our own play, it affects the play of our opponents. Crazy. And it makes sense, but I really never thought of it that way all that much. But back at Firestone Stadium, so I saw all of these things being played out. You see a pitcher not get a call. She puts her hands up, and some basketball coach was talking about this, and I couldn't find it in my notes who it was, but anytime we put our hands up, we're in trouble. I said, hands down. Take responsibility for what's going on. But put our hands up, then our catcher gets into it, and they're frustrated. Now they can't get the pitch call in, and guess what happens? Things start to fall apart a little bit because they have lost control, because they're not happy that they didn't get a ball or a strike, whichever, probably a strike in this case. Turn to another pitcher who doesn't get what she wants either, because the strike zones are erratic, they're sort of erratic at times. Or just every catcher thinks everything's a strike anyway. This pitcher is like, all right, turns around, goes back through her same exact routine, taking the same exact amount of time, looks to get her pitch, comes back, does really well. Difference. Same thing. I saw a batter not happy about the pitch that was called, sort of, like, oh, okay. Doesn't let her affect her, hits a 2-run homer in the next pitch. So what we do definitely makes a difference on responses to what's going on around us. We don't control whether things are balls or strikes. We don't control what our opponent's doing. We don't control most things. But what we do control is our response. We talk about this all the time. The space between stimulus and response is where elite performers shine because they're managing their minds. Now, let's break this down. How we manage our emotion matters. According to Gross's emotion regulation theory, athletes who can reframe frustrating situations from "that's BS" to "I'll get the next one" perform better. Makes sense. Oh, that's BS, and then you stick with it. Or, okay, it is what it is. Here I go. That makes a huge difference. We have better decision making and we recover faster. Shocking, I know. And next, as we've talked a million times, is that our posture makes a difference. Having an upright posture changes the way you feel. It sort of simulates the way we feel about when we feel confident. Having a more diminutive sort of looking down at the ground, or putting our hands up, or shrugging, or doing all those different things, being slouched, does the exact opposite. Having a defeated body language creates more doubt, creates more anger. We don't have to feel confident to act confident, but when we have confident body language, it activates the same circuits as confidence does. So it's very important. In fact, the research shows that when we sit with our backs curved or our eyes down, we use more negative language. When we sit or stand with our spines erect, we use more positive or productive words. And we know that words are tools. They predict and perpetuate performance, as said Trevor Moawad in It Takes What It Takes. So whether we say something like "next pitch" or "get back to work" or whatever it is, this cuts this off at the chase and doesn't allow us to fall into negative spirals. Even if we don't feel like saying those words, if we change the way that our posture is, we give ourselves more of a chance of finding those words up there stored in our head. We know they're there, even though we're frustrated, and gets us back on track. Finally, studies show that anger narrows our attention. It delays cognitive flexibility. And when we're in situations that are frustrating, when we're in situations that are pressure-filled, we need cognitive flexibility. We need to make a decision in a big hurry. I need to decide whether I'm going to swing at this pitch. I need to decide where to throw this ball. I need to decide what to say or do next. And high-pressure moments demand cognitive flexibility. So staying calm doesn't mean that you love what's going on, and it doesn't mean that you don't care. It just means that you're in control. You're managing what you can manage. You're controlling the controllables. So here's the truth that I've shared with so many of my athletes, and I have to remind myself on a daily basis. Frustration is not the problem. What we do with frustration is the problem. That's the key. What we do with, you're going to get frustrated. How big is your gap? What we do with that frustration is the problem. Great athletes feel it, but they don't feed it. They shake it off, they refocus, they use their refocus tools, whatever that is. They choose their next action deliberately. So the next time you get frustrated, what can we do? Well, the best thing we can do is slow things down by taking a breath. And then we can use a reset, whatever that is. Use a cue word. Look at your wristband. Look at something in the outfield. Look at something on a wall, whatever your sport is, whatever your deal is, whatever your pressure situation is, and then reframe the situation. Yeah, this is a big moment, but it's not bigger than me. I've been through worse. I have managed my emotions. I have felt this emotion before and still move forward. Every emotion you feel in any situation you have felt before. That means that you can work with it. You can work despite it. You don't have to work against it. You just move on forward with it. Athletes who thrive aren't perfect. They're present. That's the key. They know that letting one bad call ruin a performance, a game, an inning, an at bat is not helpful. And I saw kids let a bad call ruin an inning and at bat, not all that often, but enough, because the margin for error in a championship game is really small. So the people who kept control were more successful, plain and simple. So let it go, get back in the game, give yourself a chance to win the next moment, because that's the one that's important now. What just happened, it's over. There's nothing we can do about it. Because what separates great players from average players is not just talent, it's what they do between events. It's what they do when moments don't go their way. That really is a separator. And that's where our mental tools come in. As I watched, I realized, as I've known for years, and you know this too, that the game doesn't just test our skill. The pressure situation doesn't just test our skill or our knowledge or our talent. It tests our mind. And those that are successful, pass the mental test, they're the ones that hold the trophies. Because ultimately, if we can keep our composure, we can manage what happens next. And that is the key. Because again, in big games, in big situations, the margin for error is very small. And we've got to be looking for variables and clues and cues to help us make the most of every moment. And we can't do that if we're angry. We can't do that if we're frustrated. We can get angry, we can get frustrated, but what do we do next? We dial in, we let it go, and we move forward. So, congratulations to all the Ohio State softball champions, 7 of them, since we now have 7 divisions. It was a pleasure to be a part of the experience with the fans and the electric atmosphere. And if you're in Akron or the Akron area and you're going to be around on June 14th, go to Firestone Stadium. Parade kicks off at 11. It's going to be tons of fun. We'd love to see anybody who has any connection to that beautiful stadium join us for that day. So, if you're interested in more information about mental performance tools, send me an email, juliej@ssbperformance.com. I'd love to connect. And let's get your team ready to manage the moments. Have a great week.